Hi all, this is Waldemar from Better Your Chess. In this video we're going to take a look at a surprising opening trap from the Russian game. It was first recorded in a correspondence game from 1950 between Leuven and Stafford. Okay, let's get started. White opened up with e4, there followed e5, knight f3, and now knight f6. This move constitutes the Russian game, or Petrov defense as it is also called. Knight takes e5, following mainline theory, and now instead of d6, which would lead to the main line, Black played a tricky but rather dubious move. He played here knight c6. Well, White decided to exchange knights on c6, but after the recapture d takes c6, some lines have already opened up for Black. Most notably, the queen has the semi-open d file at her disposal, and the black bishop has this nice diagonal at his disposal. Okay, well, let's keep that in mind, because these, let's say, these alleys of activity will become important very quickly. Now, White could have continued with d3, that's perfectly fine, but instead, after d takes c6, he played e5, and he can claim a little bit of an advantage. He's up a pawn, he's chasing the knight, and, well, in order to really set a trap, Black decided to play here another dubious move. He could have played knight d5, which would keep White's advantage within boundaries, but instead of that, he played knight e4. Now this move attacks the vulnerable f2 square, and White now made a mistake that's very easy to make. First, let me show you what would be a correct reply to this knight e4. The correct way to go would be d4, when after queen h4, again hitting this soft spot on f2, White could play bishop e3, and he easily repels Black's, well, let's call it pseudo attack. It's not really an attack, and White would enjoy a very serious advantage. But instead of that, after knight e4, he made a horrible blunder. He played d3. Now this move looks very natural, but it doesn't close the diagonal, the so-called Italian diagonal, from a7 towards f2. And Black does not have to retreat the knight. No, instead he plays a counterattack, which in 90% of the cases is normally the strongest way of defending yourself. If you would retreat the knight, you would be reacting quite passively to this attack. But in this case, Black doesn't need to retreat the knight. Okay, now let me give you a few seconds here and see if you can figure out what Black played to punish White's last rather natural looking move. Okay, please pause the video if you like, and then come back to compare answers. Well, if you figured it out, Black played here bishop c5. This counterattack, again on the vulnerable f2 square, is the beautiful punishment of d2, d3. Now the threat to f2 cannot be parried without serious concessions or material loss. Let's take a look at, well, one of the most natural moves. D takes e4. Now this move, however, loses the queen to some well-known tactical patterns. First, there is this distraction sacrifice with bishop takes f2 check. Of course, after king takes f2, Black can capture White's queen, so that's not advised. But after king e2, the bishop now makes use of the open diagonal that was opened up earlier with the trait d7 takes c6, and now Black wins the queen in another way. So after bishop c5, d takes c4 really isn't possible. So relatively best here is bishop e3. But unfortunately, now Black can wreck White's pawn structure and open up the e1 h4 diagonal. So first he captures on f2. Now it doesn't really make sense to play an in-between move like queen e2, because after bishop takes f2 check, white would have to play king e1, and now black can simply retreat the bishop. And let's not forget, that's very funny, that he is threatening to play bishop g4 here. Because after bishop g4 and queen takes g4, the g4 square is indirectly protected or defended by the knight f2 royal fork, again winning the queen. So probably best here is queen takes e4, but then after bishop takes b2, it is completely clear that, that black is winning this position. So after bishop takes e3, we return to that intersection. Queen e2 doesn't really make any sense, so f takes e3 is really forced. But then queen h4 is now a check. And unfortunately for white, king e2 leads to queen f2 checkmate. So he must opt for g3. But then, of course, we've all seen this. Now knight takes g3 is possible. And after h takes g3, which is probably best, black simply wins the rook in the corner, and with correct technique he will also win the game, because he has reached a winning position. Great! Well, with that we've come to the end of this video. Did you enjoy it? Then please consider liking, commenting or subscribing to our channel here on YouTube. Thanks for watching, and hey, be careful out there.